Okay, so I'm Craig Winterton. I'm currently leading our people and capability efforts at Lloyd's Banking Group as part of our transformation programme, but only for another 2 days actually, before I move to a startup as a head of people. But I'm going to be talking about probably a frame of reference from within a large organisation, so I think we're about 70,000 people. What I actually wanted to kind of position with everybody today is actually let's take learning up a level. Let's not let it be the thing that sits within an HR department and books us onto our next training course. Actually, it's a strategic capability that an organisation actually really needs to pay attention to and invest it, if not as much, well, more than actually, the same way you would be building your data science capability or your design capability or your engineering capability. In fact, those things are bound to change. Can't really predict what skills we need in 5 years' time, but we do know that we will always need to continue to learn, right? So, and failure to do that basically lands you with an unresponsive organisation. A workforce whose mindset and skill set is quite fixed and is unable to adapt to your customer needs or your end user needs, whatever they may be. And I think further to that, I think what you actually end up seeing is a big, clunky, difficult, expensive workforce transformation program every 3 years if you fail to actually face into it now and sustainably. Ultimately, what you're doing it by having learning not as a capability is just postponing it. And it becomes too big and too difficult to manage as an organisation. So that's the thing I really want to position. I think it is cultural, I agree with that. And I think before you start thinking about all of the bells and whistles initiatives that we can start to do to build a learning culture and build learning at scale, it's important that we look at what's working against us. So as an organisation, we are a system and there are system constraints and forces that we need to recognise. And we'd be quite well suited to start picking away at those things before thinking about running our next Lunch and Learn series, which happens to be on a WebEx or virtual or whatever it is. Yes, you'll get some value out of that, but it will be limited in its true potential until you start working away at the system constraints, right? So it is a bit negative, but I want to list some of those system constraints, and then I'll try and introduce a few ideas at the end as well. So, and there's some similar themes coming out already from the first talk, but hierarchy. I'm not against hierarchy, but when it's not used in the right way, it can become a big problem, right? So this is really about leaders not feeling like they can be vulnerable, not feeling like they can say, I don't know, and effectively not role modelling learning as a behaviour that you want to see in your leaders. You might also end up with a mindset of, I've made it now, so I don't need to worry about learning. It's for the junior people to worry about, and that doesn't build this system and culture of learning that you start seeing it at scale. The ways of working as well, so if you're only focused on delivery, 100% of team capacity is focused on delivering the product, the service out to the end user, you're doing that thing where you're postponing the necessary learning to a point in time where again it's unmanageable and it becomes something that is a point in time rather than constant. So I think that's something that we need to recognise. And then also what we measure is incredibly important. So if we measure outputs and we're just trying to do things cheaper and faster, yes, that might be a good strategy, particularly in financial services where interest rates are lower for longer and there aren't too many new revenue streams. But if we're not focused on what the outcome is, and that allows you to start thinking about quality and value for your end user, then you can create blind spots. And actually when there are no kind of new revenue streams popping up just out of the obvious, you need innovation, and in order to have innovation you need to know more things and you need to have more skills so you can join the dots and start fusing new ideas together. So that can create a blind spot as to why learning doesn't happen in an organisation depending on what you're measuring as being successful. This came out a little bit before as well, so this is around how we actually communicate with each other, and I think generally when you sign an employment contract, that's a formal legal agreement between two adult parties, and at that point, adult to adult, as soon as, and in my experience, as soon as you go into the workforce, you very quickly become the child, and the organisation becomes the parent. And there's a fairly valid reason for it. There's a massive war for talent at the moment, right? So there's a skills shortage that is pretty difficult for most organisations. So you have to start looking attractive to the talent that's available, both within your own organisation and outside of your own organisation. What that can lead to is being too paternalistic. So you create a dependency culture of the organisation will develop for me, and learning will be something that gets done to me, as opposed to me as an individual, who's frankly, my part of the employment contract is that my skills are relevant to the goals of which you're trying to deliver. So I actually want to be spoken to like an adult and told that my skills are irrelevant. And what I see actually in our own organisation and in others is really soft messages. Don't worry, it's going to be okay, we're going to go on this journey together, which is a part of winning hearts and minds, but actually we're cotton wooling our own people, which isn't really preparing them for the real eventualities of what might become later on. And then my favourite, which probably underpins all of these things, and it is not, if not the root cause of all evil, is performance management and rewards systems that accompany it, right? So all this, I mean, there have been tweaks in some organisations over the last few years. I haven't seen anything super transformational, to be honest, but our performance management processes still really encourage individualism over the success of a team, which is anti-collaboration, which then also means that that's another way of learning, right, is learning through others and collaborating through others as well. So that's all the negative stuff out of the way. A few ideas, I guess, which I've landed on, which I think help us solve that, and to be honest, to the flip side of everything else that I've just said. So before going in and designing your next initiative, think about the forces that are working against you in your own organisation. So take a system view of it. Just by introducing this here, will it actually unlock it or reach its true potential? Be honest and treat your people like adults. There's already a theme that's developing, but tell people how it is. You can still do that in a positive way, and you can still create a platform for change. But that's the type of thing that will spark people into action. So two organisations I've seen do this really well are IBM and AT&T. They've both said these are the skills for the future and for now, actually. IBM even went out and said these are the top 10 declining skills. So there's a good kind of message there, which is, oh, hang on, I recognise those skills in me on that list. What they did is they gave them the opportunity to go and do something about it. They gave them time. I think IBM in particular said, we want you to do a minimum of 40 hours learning a year. You can do it in your own work time. And I think they captured the data. The minimum amount of learning an IBMer does each year is 96 hours. So they gamified the whole kind of self-learning and taking ownership of your own learning. We've seen actually in Lloyd's getting our leaders to talk about the journeys that they've been on, showing some vulnerability, showing some humility, a really powerful tool. And so what you actually start doing is role modelling that leadership behaviour, learning as a leadership behaviour, as something that you can then recruit into with your future leadership pipeline as well. So it almost becomes self-sustaining. And actually build learning into the critical path. So there's a few organisations now, I don't think Google's the best example of it, but the kind of 10% time, 20% time where you're actually putting learning into the work, and you can even frame it as research to do the thing you're doing better, so you don't scare off all the kind of big people that say, no, we can't give up the time. It's actually research to improve the way that we're doing work. Build it into the critical path, because you'll only end up postponing it, as I mentioned before. It becomes a bit unmanageable and you can't break it down into chunks that the organisation can cope with. This is a personal point from me around futurism. So not everybody needs to watch Black Mirror and get freaked out, but I do believe that sci-fi isn't too far from the truth at the moment, and we're actually starting to see these things come scarily to life a lot quicker than we might have thought. So to bury your head in the sand and to not really pay attention to what's going on from a futurist perspective is quite dangerous, actually. So I think we also need to just start introducing a healthy dose of futurism. We don't have to go to extreme, but into our own learning curriculums. Let's talk about the future in a positive way. I think when we get down towards the kind of the solution end of the spectrum, let's think about other consumer products that are getting repeat customers and repeat consumption. So Netflix and Spotify are great places to look for inspiration for your own learning proposition. And how are you doing that? How are you tailoring it? Again, I'm not plugging IBM today, but they do a really good thing with IBM Watson, where it basically just feeds you the learning that you want, and that's really good data on the back of that. And I mentioned it earlier, but I don't think I did mention it actually, but we just flipped the language of performance management to growth management. You reframe that whole problem, and you get a plethora of new options to start thinking about, how do I grow as an individual, how do I grow as a team, how do I grow as an organisation, rather than I'm going to manage your performance. So to summarise, there's plenty to do. I think focus on what's working against you before just drumming up the next shiny initiative, which, don't get me wrong, might be quite successful, it might look good, but you might be just limited in really achieving that learning at scale. And I guess my question for us to think about is, how can we almost work with the people within our own organisations to help them change how they view learning as something that isn't just things that get done to people or the perk as part of your employee contract, but actually as a strategic capability in the same way as you would build other capabilities. Thank you.